start.
All right, we'll walk you through all the supplies you need to start with first, and I'll walk you through the step-by-step. Plate needs to be big enough for the disc to physically sit into, like this. Recommendation, go to like the Dollar Tree. You can get plates like this for $1. Try not to use stuff the wife's gonna kill you over. Saran wrap, 1 plastic ruler, shaving cream. Obviously this is just cheap Meyer brand. Again, it's got to be the white shaving cream. You can use Barbasol if you want, but Meyer brand is cheaper. The stuff they have like at the Dollar Tree, that stuff does not work as well and does not last as long. Spray bottle, so you can spritz the dye bed before the disc goes in it. And then lastly, your physical dye. We're working with orange because that's what you said you had today. So keep in mind, you have to use darker colors only, dark colors that are darker than the disc. So red, purple, blue, and we use a small amount of black. Now, like I said before, get all your dye into the salt shakers first, and then tape around the sides of the salt shaker. I would recommend that you tape some of the holes off on the top as well. It gives you more control as you drop the dye out onto the dye bed. First things first, saran wrap goes over the plate. Why? Because it makes your cleanup that much easier. When you pull the disc out of the bed when it's finished, you can simply take the saran wrap off, throw it in the trash. That way you're not having to wash all the shaving cream and the dye down the drain, and you don't risk getting all of that extra stuff onto your counters and again pissing off the old lady. So push the saran wrap down so you have a nice bowl inside of the plate. Shaving cream does not take a ton of this stuff. Keep that in mind and do not waste a ton. You can usually get 5 to 6 dye beds out of 1 can, sometimes more. This will be more than enough. You can get an idea of how much I've kind of got in there. So where the ruler comes in, you're just going to go back and forth to smooth out the bed as best as you can. Just drag the ruler across the dye bed. It's going to take a couple of times to smooth it out. That's okay. If you want to try and disperse shaving cream as evenly as you can across the bed, and then you'll want to try and make it as smooth as you possibly can. Don't mind the kids in the background. Like yours, I'm sure mine are equally as loud, even though you've only got the one right now. All right, that's pretty good for being smooth. You want to try and get as many holes out of the center of the bed as you can. If it's not perfect, it's not a big deal. You're not working with liquid, you're working with dry dye, so this will work just fine. I'm gonna rinse. All right, we're not working with any vinyl because this is your first attempt. So we're gonna do some simple designs with the dye. You can work this out a ton of different ways, just kind of depends on the effect that you want to have for your dye bed. For me, I'm going to do swirled lines out from the center, going to the edge of the disc. Most important thing with these is to go as almost all the way to the edge of the dye bed. The disc itself is about 8.25 inches on a driver. It's a little larger for a mid, depending on what you're working with. So you're gonna have to go pretty far out. As you can see, this doesn't take up the whole dye bed, but it takes up most of it. So keep that in mind as you're laying the dye out. Oh, what do we start with first? We'll start with red. Okay, now we start at the center. try to leave yourself like in an area where you can move your body around the dye bed, so you can get more control over how the dye falls out. I tap it, don't shake it. Tap the dye out, and then I just spin my wrist for this specific style. Come back the opposite way, do the same thing. Again, spin your wrist. Where we're working with so far. Again, simple, nothing crazy, very easy stuff to begin with. As you get more and more comfortable doing this, you can kind of take it a little farther if you want to.
The center.
What?
The center.
What about the center?
Some people might want to find their center first.
Well, again, as Sarah mentioned, you may want to find the center of the plate. You don't have to be spot on for this specific style. You can kind of center the disc where you want the middle of the design to be. When you start working with other stuff, most definitely you may want to have a physical center, which again, depending on the size of your plate, you can just kind of find that. And I use a toothpick to put a hole in the center of it, but it's going to depend on the size of the physical plate. All right, pretty simple. I didn't line these up well enough, which isn't a big deal for me. Again, don't be too complicated your first time through. But once you have the dye laid down, you're gonna want to spritz the bed lightly. So a couple of sprays over the top of the bed to get the colors physically going on the dye bed. About like that, nothing crazy. You're gonna start to be able to see the colors start to come through on the bed. You can see the red, you can see the blue, you can see the purple, you can see some of the black. This is where you're also gonna notice where you had like all your extra dye drop, which isn't, again, a big deal in this case. Once you start to try to get things cleaner, you can work through that when you get to that point. Let it sit, let the bed sit and soak the color in for a couple of minutes. I would say maybe 3 to 4 minutes. When that's done, you would lay the disc into the bed. I'm not going to wait as long for the sake of the video, which isn't a big deal for me. Again, I'm doing one of the discs I'm going to throw anyways, so I'm not overly worried about it. Most important thing here, as you're laying the disc into the bed, is not to start at the center. You're going to want to lie it down like this. So find out where you want it to start, but lie down from one end and slowly push the disc down towards the other end of the dye bed. Biggest reason for this is to try and keep yourself from having as many air pockets on the physical disc itself where the dye does not come into contact with the disc. Just like that. Now you can choose to push and twist if you want to have the dye have a little more movement to it, or you can let it rest and it will do its own work over time as it sits in the dye bed. This is S-line, so 24 hours roughly. If you're working with Big Z, you can go a little longer if you want to, but 24 hours should be good for Big Z plastic. That stuff soaks up the color pretty well. I am going to push this in and spin it a little. That's it. Store it somewhere where obviously the kid can't get to it. Keep it out of reach of the kid, and make sure it's nowhere where like the wife's gonna bump it. Most important thing with this is to leave it for the next, I don't know, right now it's noon, so I will probably check it again tonight after 8 to 12 hours. What I will do at that point is I will pull the disc slowly out of the dye bed and just pat down the areas where the dye is at to make sure that I have all my contact points soaking in the dye, and lay it back down in the bed exactly how you pulled it out. That can be a little difficult depending on the design you do, but for, again, purposes of doing it the first time, I wouldn't fret over it too much. Other than that, after the 24-hour mark, pull it out of the bed, wash with soap and water in your sink. Hopefully it's stainless steel. If it's not, you need to find somewhere else to wash it off at, because this stuff will stain anything that is not stainless steel. Keep that in mind, please.
The table.
Like, yes, this table, for instance. And once that's done, you'll just pull the saran wrap off over the trash can, throw that away, wash your plate, wash the disc with warm soap and water, and you're done.